Hello and welcome to a new episode of the AST Podcast. In honor of the upcoming Super Bowl, we're looking at all things sport and religion today. And we've got two superstar guests. We've got friend of the show and perennial favourite, Professor Jody Clarke, who is, of course, professor here at AST, but who was also the quarterback for the Dalhousie Tigers, and has had a long life in sport, in football and athletics and other things. We also have, new to the show, Corey Robinson, who is the coordinator, who coordinates the youth program at Saint Benedict's. Corey is also a former member of the Canadian wrestling team and was also the coach for the Canadian wrestling team. And also, I think, relevant to your sporting expertise, you worked with young offenders for 15 years, where you were using wrestling and sport as a way of helping them get their lives back on track. Correct. So we've got two people who are experts in the area of religion, experts in the area of sport, and experts in how they're religion. It's also the feast day of Thomas Aquinas, who was the open side flanker for the Paris Dominicans rugby first 15 back in the day. And the main reason for our sporting chat is because next Sunday is the Super Bowl. And Jody, you have said a very, very interesting thing. You've described this not as Super Bowl 54 or whatever it is, but as the Colin Kaepernick Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's my bias about the Super Bowl. I'm very cynical about Super Bowl, by and large. Remember a few years ago I boycotted the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Because in many ways it represents the very best of us and the very worst of us. And in recent years, I think it's come to represent some of the very worst in us. So Colin Kaepernick, if people don't know who Colin Kaepernick was the quarterback of the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers, who are in this year's Super Bowl, and a remarkable athlete. I'll just give you, so I can tell you lots of things about Colin Kaepernick. But Colin Kaepernick was reacting to two incidents one day. One day, he was affected by the shooting of a man in his apartment by a police officer who'd gone into the wrong apartment and was drunk and shot this black man on his couch while he was eating an ice cream cone. Killed him, right? Shortly after that, another black man was pulled over by two police officers, and he was shot 7 times by the 2 police officers. From the time in front of his girlfriend and the 4-year-old daughter of his girlfriend. From the time of the initial moment of contact with the driver to his death took 40 seconds. 40 seconds, right? So Colin Kaepernick was affected by that. He'll say those things affected me. And in response to that, and in recognition of of racism in America, he said, we need to do something about that. So I will kneel. I will take a knee at the national anthem. I will take a knee. And I'll try to spark dialogue or conversation and recognize that as long as we have this incredible racial disparity, and as long as black people are killed randomly, as long as there's gross injustice, we have to take a knee. We have to do something about this. For that, Colin Kaepernick was vilified. He was called a son of a bitch by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, right? And quickly, Donald Trump is a quintessential PR guy. So he spins it then to say this is an unpatriotic act. Other black athletes who begin to do it to join Colin Kaepernick are also vilified.
But he,
more than anyone, attacking the troops, attacking the flag. And he said, no, we're not doing that. Listen to it. Imagine if a president had said, gosh, Colin, what are you doing that for? I'm doing it because of this issue. Well, let's see if we can solve that. How different the world could be, or how different America would be. But no, it's actually created a greater polarization within America. So I call this the Colin Kaepernick Bowl. In honor of an incredible racial disparity. So 69% of the players in the football field are going to be African American. 67% are going to be African American. 78% of the people in the stands are going to be white, upper middle class Americans, because they're the only people who can afford tickets to those games, right? So black Americans are once again fodder in this incredible racial battle. So that's why I call it the Colin Kaepernick Super Bowl. And he's a great, just tell you another quick thing. This is how they're burying him. The John Madden football program get rid of Colin Kaepernick as soon as he took a knee. Get rid of him, okay? And I'm a big Madden fan, but he just got rid of him. The second thing they did, give you an example, in the last game, this is going to be critical to this game, in the playoff game, a guy named Raheem Monster rushed for 220 yards, set a new record for playoff rushing. They said, hey, set a new record. Does anybody know whose record he broke? He broke Colin Kaepernick's record. Nobody mentions the fact he broke Colin Kaepernick's record. Wow. Right?
Just been scrubbed from the history.
Scrubbed from history.
Like Stalinist.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why? Because he stood up.
It begs so many questions. Have we gone backwards? So if you think of the 60s, you think you've got Ali protesting the war in Vietnam. You've got I can't remember, was it the Munich Olympics? I can't remember which Olympics it was where you had the Black Power salute.
It was 68 Olympics in Mexico City.
Mexico City, yeah.
And yet today you have less and less athletes standing up. When Kaepernick does it, he's completely destroyed. I was interested, I don't know whether it was LeBron or someone, I think it might have been LeBron, who tweeted or said something about the repression of protesters in Hong Kong. Yeah. And straight away the NBA, completely clamped down. This is a big market. And so it seems to be that the desire to make money in capitalism is so massive that any sort of identity, even on the other side, Tebow was told to sort of calm it down as a Christian. And so it's become so depersonalized, so sanitized, because all that seems to matter is cash. Is this a problematic era in sport where some of the soul of sport is being lost?
Mm-hmm. Is it the business themselves that are looking for the cash, and it's the athletes looking for the individual opportunity to want to express some potential good points that we need to dialogue about in community? Is that where it's at? It's being the big corporations of the sporting teams, that the owners and the organizations are stifling the opportunity for young athletes to have a voice or to have a position of teaching our community how to dialogue on important issues. And to do something as drastic as, it's kind of funny to say it's drastic to go down on one knee, but the statement itself it speaks a lot. And then when your ulterior motive is to just make money, that may go against the grain of allowing somebody to, that person has a voice. Let's talk about it. Why are they doing it? Let's ask the proper questions and go after it. But do they have time for that? Because they want to make money. They want to.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly it. That anything which risks losing people money, they'll just nip it in the bud straight away. Whether it's Kaepernick, whether it's LeBron, and that's pretty sinister. I think, particularly when you have all along, you have great athletes who were human beings, who had lives, who had personalities, who had perspectives, who who shape thought. Think of Jesse Owens, just remarkable figures. And it's something, and I don't want to talk too much about this because this is not going to be of any interest to anybody except me. But
I'm fascinated. Go ahead.
One of the things which is destroying soccer, in my opinion, is a thing called VAR, which is, I don't know what it stands for, virtual assisted referee or something like that. Right. But it's basically the use of technology to check and to make sure there are no mistakes made. And this was brought into rugby a few years ago, it was brought into cricket a few years before that. And in addition to slowing the game down, in addition to the fact that the technology isn't sufficient for the task, so you have a thing called offside in soccer, which is similar enough to offsides in football, but it's at the time that the ball is passed, whether you're ahead of the defender. But it takes, if you slow it down, you see here's a ball and here's a boot, and the ball compresses. Frame, compress, frame, compress, frame, and then it starts to leave the boot. Compress, frame, compress, frame. And so, at what point is it actually leaving the boot? And the science isn't sufficient, or the cameras aren't sufficient to actually measure this in terms of a hair ahead of the last defender. And so that's creating a whole host of problems. But a bigger problem for me is, and we might come to this. We have 5 sections in this podcast, and all these sections will be timestamped below on YouTube. But we might come to this in the 4th section. But disappointment and tragedy and injustice are central to sport. You know, like when I used to play cricket and you'd be given out when you weren't out, it was heartbreaking, but it was also vital in terms of learning to cope and learning character. And it was about self-control. How can I control myself so that I don't lose the head and kill everyone? You know, these were important things, and it was about shaping virtue. And now, because there's too much money at stake, we can't allow these mistakes. We have to use technology to get it right. And so we're trying to use technology to annihilate the human component of things because there's too much money at stake, you know? And this whole rhetoric is, I think, damaging some of the fabric of sport. It's damaging the personal things. It's damaging mistakes.
It's taking the human out of the game. It's taking the human out of it.
And there's so many, because the great thing, one of the things that I like most about cricket was that you had to show virtues even when things weren't going your way. And that was an important part of it. Now, well, the science says, you know. And so I think that what we see with capital annihilating the human, annihilating the human voice, trying to tear sport away from society and make it pure entertainment, and therefore this is a place we go to escape politics, you know, rather than being, you know, there's a wonderful documentary I recommend to anyone, which is about West Indies cricket, and it was about how West Indies cricket evolved as a form of post-colonial resistance, you know, that the way they played cricket was aggressive, in your face. You know, it was very way of seizing back power from colonial oppressors. So sport was always part of the fabric of the social order. And in trying to tear it apart from that and sanitize it and take away any political, you know, Colin Kaepernick. I remember Tiger Woods was asked about Colin Kaepernick, and his response was, I just played 18 holes of golf and I'm pretty hungry, so I'm going to go get a sandwich.
Yeah. No comment.
Come on. No. You're one of the most powerful people on the planet, and there are black people being shot dead in their living rooms. Give us a soundbite, you know. Yeah. But he had deals to like to make, and so it seems to be a sinister development in sporting history when it is being teased apart, and we think about the role sport has played, like the language sport has got to do with politics. When I first heard that, it was during the era of apartheid, when you had people saying, no, we should send cricket teams and rugby teams to South Africa because this is about sport, it's not about politics. When it was, and you talk to any South Africans, the fabric of the stranglehold that apartheid has was loosened a little bit by things like sporting boycotts and other things like that. So sport has always been part of the fabric of society. And the ultra-capitalism of the NFL and the NBA and the Premier League soccer and things like that are now tearing it apart in a very, very sinister way. And so this Super Bowl, from what you're saying, Jody, it represents a sort of a turning point. It represents a point where sport is now entering a new era, which is even more explicitly dominated by the market and by capitalism, which is pretty negative, you know. Your sport was an amateur sport,
Olympic wrestling.
And so hopefully it was pure.
Well, yeah, Well, you want to think so. You know, if you go back to the modern Olympic Games, I guess 1895, the first modern Olympic Games. Okay, I believe that it was designed. I think there was about seven. There wasn't a lot of sports. There was about seven or eight sports, and it was designed to put a moratorium on, like, a stoppage of war at that time, so that you can collectively come together and compete as ambassadors of country in a common friendly. You know, to see the best of the best compete for their countries, and it's to put a stop on politics, war. There's no talk about that. It's not about money. It wasn't about the capitalism aspect of it. And then it obviously grew into this. You know, the last Olympics that I was involved with was 2012 in London. Okay, that would have been. I retired shortly after that, and it was interesting. Like, there was a big fight on what the logo was going to look like. Yeah, you know. It was the logo, millions and millions of dollars on how they were going to present themselves in the logo itself, in the branding, and then you deal with it, because the young athletes, including myself as a coach, it's your lifelong dream to want to be able to represent your country at the highest level, and so the athletes don't necessarily care much about it, in my experience. But then once you do well, they're all jumping in on how they can leverage their influence for that period of time, so they could grow, because you're not going to be an athlete forever, but how do you stay influential forever? And then that's where the capital, where you want to capitalize. So, they've kind of created this over this many, many years of Olympic movement. And politics and capitalism is coming into the Olympic movement more and more ever. For crying out loud, don't get me started on the esports. Like it's a video game that's going to come in to play. And good on the people that may not have ever had a sniff at an Olympic Games in their lives realistically as an athlete, but now they can play some video games. They got quick thumbs and they're good to go. I'm probably disappointing a few people out there for listening. Sorry,
but lost a
that's
big
not,
chunk
I do believe that there is a standard when you do talk about sport.
I think that's fair.
But one thing which is so. You struck on something very interesting there. I think that London Olympics was also the Boris Johnson Olympics. He was mayor at the time, and so what you have is you've got athletes who naturally, they're human beings. They want to leverage their power. Sure. You've got political figures who are looking to leverage their power, and so you've got all these things, and that will lead to, and we're going to come in the second section to talk about the Houston Astros cheating scandal. But you've got all these people who are looking to leverage things. Steroid use, a whole host of things. This is a sort of part of our legacy in the lineage of Adam, right? But what you've also had traditionally was you had bodies, whether it was the International Olympic Committee, ideally, and others, one might hope maybe the NFL, like the MLB, when it sort of, came down hard on the Black Sox and things like that. You've got bodies who are saying, look, we cannot allow or sport to be determined just by the market. Whereas now with the NFL and with their blackballing of Kaepernick, what you have is you're saying we now, the only people who could have pushed back a little bit against these forces, now we're going to subordinate completely to it. And so that really is sort of, is Goodell still the guy? Like, I think in many ways, like you have. And Kennesaw Mountain Landis was a bad guy in a whole host of ways, but his whatever heroic status he has, it's that he came in with just a zero tolerance policy of gambling after the 1919 World Series and cleaned it up. I think Goodell is going to be the inverse of that historically, that he's come in at a time where he has allowed a level of collusion between owners who have said, if Kaepernick could damage our market, we don't want him anywhere near the place. And so therefore sporting excellence is now taking a back step to the market, which is exactly the logic that the MLB used prior to Jackie Robinson breaking the colour barrier. No, people won't want to come and see it if there's black athletes involved. And the NFL today are using the exact same narrative, the exact same logic to deprive this particular black athlete of his right to work. It's a very, very, very sinister. It's in the same way that the Berlin Olympics under Hitler were sort of the sporting articulation of National Socialism. I think in many ways that's the sporting articulation of the Trump era. Where selfishness, where capital seems to dominate all. And will there be, do you think, in the TV coverage and the build-up, are we just going to put our fingers in our ears and pretend that Kaepernick isn't a factor, or will that get some airtime?
I'd be surprised if it got any airtime at all. Fox has it, so we know Fox won't support it, right? Yeah. So that's going to be a problem. I don't hear the athletes really talking about it, so that's a concern for me. Yeah. Going back to the crass cynicism of it, if we actually listened to Colin Kaepernick and to other black athletes who said, look, we have a problem here. I'm going to use my profile to raise social issues, right? Then you actually may attract more black people to the sport, although I think it's still pretty attractive. Yeah. But going back to your point, the collusion that the owners have, who is your primary market for the NFL? It's mostly white, lower middle, upper class people.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, it's about a whole lot of white people with money who want to cash in on the sport. I know lots of black people go to the games, but basically about 25% of your audience pan the crowd, watch the crowd, join the Kaepernick Bowl, mostly white, influential people. Seriously, that's how priced the tickets are. So I think Goodell and all the owners have colluded to create this little market, and they're going to hold hard to it, and they're going to destroy anybody that deviates from the norm.
And so what is so straight away, I'm in a bind. What can we do? What can sports fans do to not collude?
Well, I think you support Colin Kaepernick. It's really interesting that Nike, God love Nike, Nike ran an ad after, crass capitalism, they ran, and one of the most successful Nike ads featured Colin Kaepernick after he was blackballed. Right? And the top selling 49ers uniform in the history of the 49ers is Colin Kaepernick.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
so
interesting.
we can do things. Like if I could go out and buy a Colin Kaepernick, it probably costs $100, right? And then I'm colluding with the Prince of Darkness, right? So,
but boycott the Super Bowl?
Well, I did that once, and it was a big mistake. It was the most exciting Super Bowl ever. The one that New England came back from it. People couldn't believe I boycotted it.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Malcolm Butler.
Incredible. So anyway, I boycotted, and it was the one after Malcolm Butler.
Okay.
And I boycotted one. It was one against Atlanta at the collapse of the Falcons. But anyway, no, I think we have to have critical eyes and bring critical eyes to bear on it. There are some really great storylines in it, and that's why it's so important. You mentioned earlier the original Olympics took place in religious centers, in temples. Right. Both in the Greek culture, you did it in front of the gods. It was a religious experience. The Mayans did the same thing. The Mayan temples they had athletics there. They were done in the presence of the gods and in veneration of the gods. The beauty and majesty of doing the very best you can, wrestling to the very best of your ability, throwing the football to the very best of your ability in the glory of God, right? Yeah. And there was a sense of national euphoria about that. So you've got America, and I think the Super Bowl is America's biggest secular religious festival, the biggest one, right? It's huge, right? Wow. It's gigantic. And it's a religious festival. It has all kinds of rituals associated with it. It has all the heroism that we want to have associated with any major event. So I think if we can hold on to the things that are virtuous and good about it and be critical of the things that are crass about it, right? That are all about spectacle. Christians were critics of spectacle because and so we always had this kind of Tertullian we had developed this ambivalence towards spectacle. I like spectacle when it's done for the right reasons. So spectacle would be you're trying to do something, you're trying to manipulate the audience. It's bigger than it is, right? You're saying in this corner is blah 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 instead of saying in this corner is Corey, an incredible athlete. In this corner, David Dean, incredible athlete. Boom. And you let the beauty of that precision come, but you add all this other stuff onto it to manipulate you, to manipulate the audience, right? So spectacle with the Christians were said, but that's a falseness. See, Tertullian critiqued it for its falseness. He said you're being dishonest about a virtue. And so the same thing's true about Super Bowl. We're creating a dishonesty about it. But let's get back to the honest reality of a group of athletes who don't use steroids. They use steroids. So don't use steroids. Who work hard, who will battle to the very best of their ability, and at the end shake each other's hands and say, "Well done."
Jody's mentioned steroids. We're going to come back in our second section where we're going to talk about cheating. And I want to talk about obviously the Houston Astros cheating, and I've got some hot takes on that. But also I'm interested in whether you cheated and how you cheated and things like that. So part 2 coming up. So one of the biggest sporting stories of 2020 thus far has been the cheating scandal involving the Houston Astros. So the Houston Astros they had a camera in center field which was stealing signs. So the pitcher says, I'm going to pitch a fastball or a curveball to the catcher so the catcher can catch it. But then there's a guy in center field and he's relaying that information to the guys in the dugout who bang a trash can or something if it's going to be an off-speed pitch. In addition, some players, including my favorite player in probably all of sports, Jose Altuve, was wearing a little buzzer. And so it would buzz when there was a curveball coming. And I remember in this year's playoffs, Aroldis Chapman, who pitches 103, 104 miles per hour, and Jose Altuve took him deep, walk-off home run on a curveball. And looking back, he was known because when he was coming in and all his players were there, he had his jersey like this, and so he was afraid that they'd pull it off him,
right.
and he'd be exposed. And again, anything I say has got to be balanced by the fact that I love Jose Altuve, right? So this is probably bias coming in here. But we need, I think, to slightly differentiate between WASP cultures and non-WASP cultures. And what I mean by that is there's a wonderful book written on the history of Argentinian soccer called Angels with Dirty Faces. And it looks at Argentinian culture, but also it touches on Italian culture and other sort of Mediterranean and indeed Latin American cultures, which don't have the same experience of authority as Germany, the United States of America, England, because so often authority was imperial authority. It was authority which was oppressing us, and so the police weren't considered the good guys; they were the bad guys, and so it was considered not simply morally acceptable, morally virtuous to pull a fast one. Even in Ireland, there is an expression, a cute whore, H-O-O-R, and it's someone who sort of pulls a stroke or pulls a fast one. And these people have status in the culture. Or if you look at Russian fairy tales, like in Russian fairy tales, the heroes are those who sort of sneakily dupe the gods
classical heroes
something
do the
like
same
that.
thing. Achilles. Look,
Absolutely.
These guys are all tainted guys.
Yeah.
Women too.
And so they come from that kind of culture. And so people are wondering how Jose Altuve, as an upstanding Christian, could cheat. Well, in his culture, one's skill, one's ability involves one's capacity to use whatever levers are at your disposal to succeed, including pushing the boundaries of cheating. And this is a long history in baseball. So sign stealing is now technologically savvy. But if you look back at the earliest forms of baseball, it's a culture of cheating. And one of the reasons why I think it was is because if you think of Tug McGraw, if you think of many of the great early baseball coaches, they're from an Irish background, And so like many Latin Americans of today, they come from a culture which sees authority as that to be resisted. And so that culture is there from that post-colonial mindset in Ireland, and it's there in post-colonial cultures today. And so I think that when American culture is seeking to process this history of cheating and the demonizing of the cheaters, it needs to be aware that cheaters are less demonic in post-colonial contexts than they are in contexts like the States, where there is law, good governance, etc., or in England, which has a culture of fair play that Celtic nations never had. And so I think that, and so that's my diatribe on the Houston Astros, again, tainted by the fact that I love Jose Altuve and I'm looking to try and give him an excuse.
You're trying to give him an out.
You're trying to give him an out. Now again, I am obviously opposed to cheating and playing cricket and rugby. I was
It's a
allergic
question
to
of
it.
degree, right? So You're absolutely right. The heroes, many of the sports heroes, they have this little edge. They can. And in baseball, you used to the coach would send in signals, the catcher would go send in signals, and you try to out signal the other guy, right?
Yeah.
So you think he's sending a signal in, you send a signal out,
Yeah.
and it's that it's a kind of an edginess. It's a part of how the sport's played, right?
Yeah.
The runner in second base, he can read the signs, right?
Yeah,
The catcher
yeah.
hides a bit, but how do you relay that then on to the batter? So the guy. He's at second base. He sends a signal to the batter saying, "I think that's a fastball, right? I think that."
Yeah.
So it's a little it's a question of degree. It's a small degree, right?
Yes.
And there's a weakness over there, so we're going to exploit that weakness a bit, and that's kind of how those reptilian kind of characters. The guy at third base is injured. We're going to hit to third base, and is it cheating? It's not really cheating. You're rubbing against an edge. So there's that lovely degree of manipulating within the bounds of
within the boundaries of the field.
Football does it too.
Field.
You're trying to figure it out, right? You're trying to figure out what the other team's trying to do, watching their signals. But in this case, it's high tech.
Yeah.
It's using something else to create. So now to create a huge imbalance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I like Altuve, one of my favorite players as well. Like he's 5'6". He's a
5'3".
mythic character too. 5'3".
He's a little
He's an amazing guy.
I
Right?
have
So just in his own right, he's an
love.
amazing guy, right? But that's. For me, there's a degree of difference here that is really quite insidious, right? It really gets at the heart of it. So I'd be very moralistic, and I appreciate what you're saying about other cultures and how other cultures live. But I can always look at a person from the Houston Astros. I can look them in the eye and say, "I've never cheated, and you've cheated."
Yeah.
Can you look another guy in the eye and say, "I've never cheated."
Yeah.
I've bent the rules a bit, pushed a bit,
Right.
but I've never cheated that. I've never taken the world. Now they had an incredible team. They probably would have won it in their own right anyway, right? Which is really the anomaly or the tragedy of it. Although they were doing it during the season, right?
Yeah.
They were doing it during the season. So I think there should be either an asterisk.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Montreal Expos, right? Montreal Expos. The best team in the majors, the strike season, right?
Yeah.
They were 8 of their players go that team go into the Baseball Hall of Fame, right? There's a strike that year, right?
Yep.
It's a Canadian team. If the Montreal Expos had been in New York or in Washington where they end up, that strike would have been settled. No, I'm not kidding, right?
Absolutely.
So the collusion around this kind of stuff has been around for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I'm with you.
there's
You're
an asterisk.
right.
There's one season there wasn't a World Series. There should be in was it 2017 the asterisks or the elimination. They are not. They got to give them back their rings.
Yeah.
Yeah, this asterisk. Where does it stop, really? Like what was it? The 71 home runs. There's an asterisk. The 70 and the who is the
Barry Bonds, but all those guys who broke
because there was so many games in the year and all this.
Oh,
sort of
originally,
thing.
Roger Maris,
Maris's record. So for me, with the Altuve situation, I love the guy too.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for an out. So I look at it like that. I ask myself the question: okay, let's define cheating. Let's define it. Okay, let's define it. So, unfortunately, I have to come to the conclusion that if you can manipulate in a way to bend the rules or move the rules in a clever enough way where it's within the confines of the game itself, the players that are out there, yourself, your coaches, and you figure out a loophole to get a sign, I think that's good. But if you have somebody in the stands, who's not a part of the game and in the game, then unfortunately you have to say he's a cheater.
A 10th player.
A 10th player, exactly. And then because I know for one, I like to any edge I could possibly get to win. I'm going to take it outside of taking in an external factor. So, for example, people have asked me, Corey, have you ever done? Because I'm involved in Olympic wrestling. There's a lot of muscles and bravado and all this sort of thing attached to it. Have you ever taken steroids or a performance enhancement? And my answer sometimes it's always no, but illegally because I've never. But kinda, because what? Okay, I've taken creatine. Creatine. It's not on the banned drug list. It's not natural. It's not like I create creatine in my body naturally with the right foods and this sort of thing, and it's just not. But if I have a little extra and it's not on the ban, is that cheating? Yeah. Right. Well, okay, I'm a cheater then. But because the society tells me I'm not, then I'm not. But
and
now
it's not
cheating. Now you can't.
Yeah, right? It's so, WADA has creatine is banned by WADA now.
It's banned to a certain. I was so steeped on the WADA because you have to be as a coach. You have to be kind of on top of all that stuff. I believe it's a banned substance to a certain milligram or whatever it is. But again, people are going to play with it. For my sport, it's weight loss is usually the thing. You have weight divisions, and they call it artificial weight loss. Okay, so if I'm a 125.5 pound wrestler, that was my competition weight class for the national program. I wouldn't naturally sit at 125 pounds walking around. I'd be walking at 150 like most times of the year. So I got to bring myself down artificially to make a weight division on the night before the competition. By the next morning, I'm 145 pounds again, stepping on a.
And so what are you doing? You're in a sauna.
So you're in a sauna.
You're spinning.
You're spinning it up. You put a bag on it, like a garbage bag or whatever. We call them sauna bags. You can actually buy the actual item itself that acts as a bag on your body. And there's creams, there's pills, there's all sorts of things that people would take. Unfortunately, well, as a coach, as an athlete, I learned the wrong way of doing it. I didn't know any other way. Your coach says, make that weight class. How do I do that? Well, just do it. Yeah. So then you model the wrong way of everybody else done it. Yeah. But as a coach, I learned I'm never going to put my athlete in that. I want you to compete with where you're most naturally, where you can be optimal at your the level of weight. So if it meant having to pull a few pounds, it would be done in a way where you're properly weight managing yourself over a long period of time, not cramming for an exam and losing 20 pounds over 2 days, right? And to get down to your weight class.
So
it's kind of a cheat.
It was never
to get onto a weight class. It's not even your weight class. Yeah.
Right? Like when I was playing sport, there was like we didn't have access to any steroids or anything like that. Like when we were playing rugby, we were always given creatine. Drink that,
drink
go to the gym.
That.
Drink that, go to the gym.
Trust everybody.
And you just do what you're told. And I think that if I had the opportunity, I wouldn't have availed of it. What about you? When like if you were told there's this banned drug, this anabolic steroid or whatever, what would have been the kind of things going through your head?
So. Are you asking me if I've ever been tempted to take it? Like, have I been asked to?
Yeah, like what kind of rationale?
How would I go in my brain?
Yeah, so what kind of thinking process? You can say, okay, I can take this, and it's going to increase my chance of a medal. And those other assholes, they're probably taking it.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing in cycling. That's right. That it was like a sort of going to be the one guy.
Everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
And again, I think it comes down. Like, thankfully, I've had such good models in my life as an athlete, in my family. My father modeled phenomenal virtue, and it just comes down to just integrity. I'd rather lose than not do it right.
And you were always that way?
Always. Just wired as a kid. Like sometimes when you're playing Monopoly as you're a young person, you got the family Monopoly game out, and it can get pretty cutthroat, right? It gets pretty cutthroat, but there's rules within the rules. Yeah. And then sometimes there's rules within the rules, right? Like, well, what dictates in the rules that if you land on the Park Place or whatever, that you get the middle stack of money that's somehow there, or you get a jail free card or whatever. If you land on that twice, then you get all the money in the pot. Whatever these made up rules are. See, I had a hard time with that. To me, the rule is this. Yeah. I want to win within the confines of the rules, and I don't care. I had no draw towards doing something extra that was unethical. Yeah. Even as a kid, I didn't even know what ethics really was. I was just wired for justice. We're wired for the truth and wanting to do it.
Good for you.
And then it stuck with me. And I'm not trying to say, don't put me on this pedestal of, he's a forever virtuous guy. Forget it. I looked at every angle to try to do it. But for whatever reason, I was very thankful to have good people around me to kind of, to set me in a path of keeping your integrity intact, because at the end of the day, you're not remembered. Like I was always taught, you're not remembered for your matches, your medals, your accolades. You're remembered for your integrity. So when somebody 10 years from now talks about, a particular event that you won or what you've achieved as a person, they're actually not talking about that. They're probably going to have a conversation as, hey, I remember Dean. He was a good guy. He was a good man. He was a good teammate. He was always there for you. Not about the up-teen amount of matches you've won or what you've done to win those. It's about the integrity. So I want to keep that intact. I'd rather lose. I'd rather go down in a ball of flames in a loss, knowing I was the only one that didn't cheat out of all those cyclists. Right? I could
Good
sleep
for
at
you.
night then.
Yeah.
Jody, is that your experience too?
I completely agree, which raises another issue. But so yeah, I wouldn't say as an individual athlete I didn't cheat. An interesting caveat: I did coach football at the University of Toronto in the small college league, and this is my cheating story. We would have athletes who weren't eligible to playing, but everybody did. So my question is, we all did. Like there were 4 or 5, like 6 or 7 teams in that division, and we all had brought in a couple extra guys just to make sure that we were okay. And if we hadn't, it would have been dangerous for my team, basically. So we all were doing it. At the end of the day, I felt like I could look the other coaches in the eye and say, we all know what we're doing. It's kind of an unreading rule about allowing some of the alumni to play. That was
elephant in the room,
kind of come to cheating. But I think going back to the having integrity, I think that's a really critical piece that gets lost in sport, and the ability to have virtue and cultivate virtue. So I look at who coached the coaches of the Houston Astros. That would say, that at some point your mentor coach failed you in saying, whatever edge you can use, because, I can count the number of great coaches I've had, and I played lots of sports. Maybe I've had 4 or 5 of hundreds of coaches, not hundreds of coaches, but lots of coaches who really were about virtue, ethics, being able to look the other athlete in the eye, working with integrity, playing with integrity. And those are the coaches I most remember. Those are the guys whose counsel I still call on.
Absolutely.
Years after, when they'll say, you'll do the right thing. I think those are important virtues and important values that we have to have
in wrestling. You would have, and again, it's the same in boxing. Sometimes at the end of a match or whatever, they would raise a hand in victory. So a referee would come over and raise a hand in victory. Yeah. Okay, so in order to kind of draw home the integrity piece as a coach, as I'm trying to train these athletes to be virtuous athletes and not really worry too much about what status it'll bring you. It just needs to be, your integrity needs to be intact. When that arm is raised, you've been given the gift and you've earned the right to have one arm raised, not 2. So you'll see a lot of times in movies and whatever sport, the arm's raised by the referee and then the other one goes up, right? I would always come back to my athletes and have a conversation after, because I want to nip it in the root, because we all want to be affirmed, and you want to have this influence of being a winner, and it starts there young. When that second arm goes up, I want to have the conversation with the athlete and say, what drew you to want to raise that second arm, right? Because if we're going to be humble, virtuous, and protect our integrity, we want to be able to respect our athletes that we're competing against. So putting up that second arm, all that's saying is you're that much more better than the other athlete, but you have not earned that right to have the second. That's all you're telling yourself, and you're telling everybody else that you're better than what you've already earned.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. The only place where I think there's a slight wrinkle, so certainly when I was playing cricket, that grandstanding, arrogance, absolute out the window, no room for that whatsoever. But I remember I was probably 16 at the time, and in cricket it's kind of like a foul tip to the catcher. You're right if it nicks the bat, and then the wicketkeeper, the catcher catches it, and the players would appeal to the umpire for a decision, and the umpire would hopefully give the player out, but the umpire wouldn't always. And then the tradition states that the batter should walk, should voluntarily leave. And I remember doing that when I was about 16 and getting a real bollocking from the from the captain, because his rationale was that I had put my own sense of self-righteousness above my teammates, that I had a job to do for my team, and I had to subordinate my desire to feel good about myself ethically to the team. And I agree with you 100% in terms of personal glory, personal grandstanding, but there's a whole host of moments when, if you've got your teammates relying on you, so if you're playing soccer and you're fouled, and the ref gives a penalty and it's not a penalty, dream scenario, you say, no ref, no, that wasn't a penalty, let's scrap that. But you've got 10 other guys who've been bursting their ass for this, and are you going to, so...
And then I go into I'm trying to follow you.
Well, again, so is your primary responsibility to an abstract ethical code, or is your primary moral responsibility to those teammates who have journeyed with you? They don't necessarily care too much about David Dean's sense of self-righteousness. They care that David Dean does the job for them.
Right.
And so if that means when I'm out staying in there and making runs, then that's what they want me to do.
But are you making runs with a grandstand?
No. You're doing it as humbly as hell.
Yeah.
But you're cheating.
Right.
Because you're out. You shouldn't be like you should have been given out. You should have walked and said, "No, I'm out." But you're not doing it. So let's take diving in soccer. You know,
Okay.
Someone like Luis Suarez, you know, he would never say that he's diving for himself.
He's diving for the greater good of the team.
He's subordinating his own moral righteousness and indeed his own fame, because people will look on him with disgust afterwards.
Yeah.
But he's doing that for these other guys and for those people in the stands who are working 5 days a week and all they want. That, because that's they're the ones that he's loyal to.
Right.
You know?
And you know what? I respect that level of thought towards others for the greater good of the team win. But I still think it's wrong.
Yeah.
Like I honestly think you can still win without diving like an idiot.
Yeah.
Like I don't particularly love that part of the game, and I'm actually kind of tired of them using it, or people, or the soccer fans or whatever, using it as an excuse to say that as part of the game. I don't believe it is. I think you can win without falling down.
There is a fascinating, and
you can still win.
I'm worried about it, but there is. I'll link to it below. The famous Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci wrote about soccer back in the 1920s. And in the 1920s in Italy, soccer was a British import, to such an extent that in Italy and in South America today, the coach is called Mr. Because it was always traditionally an English guy. And Gramsci was making the point that soccer would never catch on in Italy. Essentially, and he pointed to a card game that was played, and he was saying, because we Italians, we are, you know, elbowing under the table, we're trying to pull a fast one, and this is a sort of an ethical game full of moral virtue and probity. And one of the fascinating things is that soccer did become an Italian game, but the soccer that became the sport in Italy was a sport which had more in common with the cheating card game than with the Victorian values sport that the British people were were promoting, and that's the thing that is sort of traditionally in the 70s and the 80s, and we think of Diego Maradona's famous Hand of God goal against Peter Shilton. The look on the British players, the English players' faces, like this can't happen, you know. But there was a clash of two different cultures and two different moral frameworks. And I'm not necessarily sure that if we absent the God factor and the eternal good, you know, that it's not more complex. People from WASP backgrounds, England, Germany, North America, will be far harder on diving than people from Latin America, Spain, Italy. You know, I'm now thinking maybe Catholic contexts. Maybe we're
maybe because like a cheat.
Maybe we're intrinsically immoral. You know, and again, you know, you've got Weber Protestant work ethic. You've got a whole host of factors in there which is shaping how a culture
But let's get
works.
into the grittiness of it. So I like what you're saying, but a part of the Olympics, a part of this whole thing is actual conversation about moving in and having different cultures play against each other and having those values questioned, pushed, probed. The grittiness of sport, I think, is an exciting thing.
We're not gone. Excellent.
Sorry, I think that's the grittiness of it.
Yeah.
So look at hockey, for example. North American hockey, basically pretty freaking boring until we got involved with the Russians.
Right.
The Russians,
And then it made it
European
interesting.
hockey shifts how we see hockey. Hockey opens up. It's a different kind of sport today. And so I think hockey's learned from that East-West conversation in a great way. I mean, I find hockey just far more interesting, far more intriguing. We used to be, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Bronx Bullies. Everybody, it's about pounding each other senseless. And now you got to be a finesse player. The bullies are almost all now gone from the game, right?
The enforcers.
Is
starting to phase
well, not only that,
itself
most
out.
of the enforcers have head injuries, right? I mean, we didn't get into that about football too, but in hockey, head injuries are a critical piece of the mix. So I like the idea of a conversation, and I think that's spiritually maybe a place where we have to go. We have to work with each other, listen to each other's cultures. Diving is crazy, but diving is a part of our culture. We do this. It's not cheating, but it's playing. And
It's
doing this
manipulating.
kind of thing.
It's trying to win
I
the
want to
edge.
go back though to something you said earlier about video replay. Video replay is a racially based issue on the good side. So what they discovered, and Michael Lewis does Against the Rules, his podcast Against the Rules, fascinating, because what Michael Lewis does, the NBA, or actually it's American college basketball, and they found that teams that had predominantly black athletes were given more fouls than white teams.
Wow.
No big surprise. But no, not just like 2 or 3 more. We're talking 20, 30 more, right, per game.
Yeah.
So they began, this guy, it was a university study, and they said, well, this is what we have, right? And they kind of take it to the NBA and say, is it true here? And the NBA, no. Yes. Not only that, teams that are blacker, where the athletes are darker than teams that are whiter black athletes, whiter dark athletes, get penalized more.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But it's caught, and now every single game in the NBA is video scrutinized for fouls and for biases on the part of the referees or umpires. I mean, this is incredible. So it's a counterpoint to your earlier question about taking the kind of the vitality out of the sport, because really it was about racism being imposed on the sport, and now referees who clearly have racial biases are given courses on racial sensitivity, which is good, or they're drummed out of the league because I'm going to call a foul on you because you're black. Well, that's the history of black athletes. You're gonna have to work twice as hard to make it because you're black. Yeah. Right.
So what you're saying is the NBA is actually right now collecting data on NBA games based on how many fouls
every single game, every single call.
So I don't know the stats or numbers, but when I watch basketball, it's predominantly a black game. So it's the odds of getting a black guy having a lot of fouls is because there's out of the 5 guys on the court, there's 4 of them are black.
Okay, now, so this is incredible class analysis. So now the athletes that are doing flagrant things, LeBron James 2 weeks ago travels. Do you remember this is famous? He's walking with the ball down the court. The referee doesn't call it. Why? Because he's LeBron James. So again, Michael Lewis takes on the question of the elite athletes, the LeBron James or whoever.
You're afraid to make the call.
The referees don't make the call against these big guys because those are the engines of capitalism that run the sport.
It was the same with Jordan.
Michael Jordan, or they used to say about Larry Bird's layup were 5 steps and up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's the guy. He's the guy. So it's now these characters. Now the bad thing about it, and this is what's really evil in my world, is that young players are emulating the superstars, and now I foul somebody. What? I didn't foul somebody.
Yeah.
No, you slapped his hand when he shot. You know. But they go, oh my God, I can't believe it. These are little kids, 12-year-olds doing the same thing. They're
modeling
emulating
the behavior.
The behavior of their, instead of, the day of the great athlete. I mean, this is the big question because it's all about money. The great athlete, and this is going back to the central point of what we're talking about. Can the great athlete, Colin Kaepernick, say enough's enough? Enough is enough. And in our society, they're vilified, right? The athletes to say no on your team and say you're letting your team down. Instead of saying to your captain, David, no, this is about being able to have integrity. This is what it's about. If you're the captain of our team and you say this, then maybe you shouldn't be the captain of our team. What? I mean, that's an insurrection. Yeah. But we're going to win because we are a team of integrity. Yeah. Right. So, and is it about cultural issues? We have to keep that grittiness in play.
Yeah. Excellent. We're going to come back in a third section, just checking through the red dot's still on. And in the third and final section, we're going to look at Kobe Bryant and conclude with some soundings from Jody and Corey about the impact of their faith in their sports life. Welcome back to the third and final part of today's podcast. This past weekend saw a terrible tragedy when a number of people lost their lives in a helicopter accident. And one of those who lost their lives was the great Kobe Bryant. How did you react to the news, Corey, and what are your memories of Kobe?
Yeah, interesting. Kobe being 41. I kind of grew up watching him. We're roughly the same age. I'm a few years older than him, but so right away, I knew right away icon. I was floored by hearing the news, almost to a point of kind of stopped in your tracks for a few seconds. Kind of those situations you'll always know where you were, like I'm thinking like that, man. And then right away, it was just grief and sadness right away that we lost this interesting character. And I've never been a massive NBA fan. I love sports, so I kind of keep an eye on the sports like a lot of people would. I like to hear the stats and see who's winning and who's the best in the moment. But I'm 5'3". I've never been to basketball.
Right.
I'm too short. So here's Kobe. Here's this guy. No, he's a great athlete. Doesn't come without his controversy at times in his life. Yeah. But here's this individual. I think it's sad that we lost him so soon, especially in retirement. He's only been retired for a little bit. You know him as a family man. You read about this, and he didn't have a chance to enjoy that on Earth at the time. He
was at Mass that morning.
Excellent to hear that. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Jody, did you have any memories of Kobe Bryant?
As a stellar athlete, much like you, being affected. My younger daughter played basketball, and I took her to countless games. Right, so he's taking his daughter to a basketball game now. He's in a helicopter, but I didn't do that. But you just identify quickly with a dad taking his kid to a basketball game and dying very quickly. There's the iconic dimension of it. I also really appreciated the integrity of. It's funny. I watched the Raptors play later that evening, of course, and there was a real pall over the festivities, which I thought was great. I mean, that we could allow so much grief to be evident. Yeah. But they said we're going to take a moment of silence, right? It was about 15 seconds, which I thought was far too short. Should have been about a minute.
24 seconds.
24. Well, no, it was about 15. Yeah. But the 24 was when the players did it themselves. Yeah, yeah. I don't know who did that. I don't know who did that. I thought that was really quite beautiful, where both teams took their 24-second runoffs, right? Which I thought was really quite.
There was one off the tip off.
Yeah.
He grabbed it and put the ball at the 3-point or at the 2-point line and just let it sit and run out the 24-second clock, which is his number and quite poignant. Yeah.
So I think they were doing some lovely rituals, which again, some beautiful things. Commentators were crying, players were crying, and they're, again, I think as you pointed out quite rightly, their identification with kind of an iconic character, a person we know of a bit. So it touches our lives and allowed ourselves to be touched. We allowed ourselves to be touched by that, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's really nice when we did it. So it's sad, it's tragic, and we lose an incredible ambassador for the sports and athletics.
Yeah,
you lose a role model too, and it's going to be interesting to see, the years and months ahead and how people react to it and how they grieve. But right now, you're inundated. If you go on the internet right now, you're inundated. If you go to any social media platform, you'll see Kobe on Instagram, Kobe on the TikTok the kids are using, on just anything you see, and I'm hoping that kind of levels itself out at some point, so we can actually see the man for who he was. If you do want to go in and read about him, because he's pretty remarkable. Coming into the league as a high schooler.
High school kid,
as a high schooler, very rare. Did LeBron James do the same thing?
I don't know.
And I believe Kobe, he never went to university, but I think he ended up getting his degree after the fact, years later, which is interesting to see that. And he's just a phenomenal role model, family man. Tragic that he had a daughter 2 months ago, another baby two months ago, and there's a lot of tragedy behind it. But what we can learn from a guy like that, his intensity, his drive and work ethic, and all this stuff now that was probably buried because only big fans would be reading about this. Now everybody's going to be able to see what this man did in his 41 years.
And interestingly, his faith life sort of blossomed towards the end of his career and afterwards. You hear of most people, it's their student life and where they, where their faith is most robust, and then it wanes once they reach fame. It seemed to be the opposite with Kobe. Tell us a bit about your relationship between your life as an athlete and your life as a Christian. Was that always a factor, or did that come later?
Yeah, interesting, because it's I guess would be similar to Kobe. I never had faith as a young athlete, as a young person growing up. It was not a driving factor in anything that I did in terms of my choices of life. Right. I sifted through. I never had any negativity. My family, I was a Catholic schoolboy, so went through Catholic school from kindergarten all the way through till grade 12.
Yeah.
Went 12 years of Catholic school system. Did not know and was never taught that it's a relationship with a person. Right. And then so when that came later on in life, and probably my early to mid 30s. It floored me that this is a person.
Yeah.
Right. So I went through that Catholic school system and never had I had a head knowledge of who Jesus was, but no heart knowledge.
Yeah.
My family, same thing. More Christmas, Easter, that sort of thing. So growing up, like I was mentioning earlier, I had a really good family of virtue, military dad that was stronghold on ethics and values and integrity, and to this is where you want to leave any sort of personal legacy. Stay in this lane. You'll be remembered for this. That's all he drove home to us, right? And there was no negative about faith. You want faith? You got faith. There's faith. There, have faith. It's good, right? Like, because he saw no drawback in having a belief.
Yeah.
And I thought that was beautiful. So I took that with me to my mid-30s. I'm still coaching a little bit. I had some addiction issues with alcohol during my tenure as a coach and athlete.
Yeah.
And kind of attach this, I can have a relationship with a person who can walk alongside me in all of this.
Right.
And it would take away the pressure of what I feel I need to accomplish as a person here on earth by myself or with a team. Right. It takes away the pressure knowing that I have this person who loves me no matter where I am in all of this mess of the world. So as I more or less applied more of my faith life into my coaching than I did as an athlete, because I never had as an athlete. I was on my own as an athlete.
So were you a prayer as an athlete?
Pardon me?
Were you a prayer as an athlete?
A prayer?
Yeah, like were you like typical Catholic, I need to win this, 3 Hail Marys and I'm shooing?
No. Was I a prayer? At times as a child I would pray before going to bed, if something went wrong. Get to have the... you ever had those conversations where you give like the ultimatum, Jesus, if you just give me this one thing, I'll go to church. I'll go to church every Sunday.
Exactly.
And that would go from either personal wants and gains to if the Edmonton Oilers could just win this one, if the Islanders get past these Islanders, like I cried myself to sleep every night as a kid watching the Oilers lose to the Islanders until they finally took over Billy Smith and was able to thank you, Jesus. I had nothing to do. They would be those kind of childlike prayers.
Yeah.
Again, meaningless in the sense of what a prayer even meant or understood. I just thought it was this bargaining chip that if I needed it, I could go get it, because I didn't disbelieve in God. I didn't disbelieve in a high power. So if I ever needed a bargaining chip to say, get me through this tough time, Jesus, and I'll be good on Sunday. And I'll be nice to my grandma when she comes because,
What about you, Jody? Did your faith life play a role in your life as an athlete or vice versa?
Yeah, I think so. I think from the very beginning. I went back to church when I was in high school, actually, in grade 11. And I did a confirmation program when I was, which was a little later than most kids did. And the confirmation class was Sunday night. And it was, I think, from 6 to 7. And when I played high school football at Dartmouth High School, we had a practice on Sunday evening, and I was a quarterback, right? So it's kind of important and it was just what was called a run-through practice. So we run through our plays. Well, you got to do your quarterback has to be there to do that, right? So they actually adjusted the practice. I would arrive a little bit late for practice to run the offense. All you're doing is just running through all your plays. You're just walking through all your plays. It's a lovely practice. It's very easy, but the whole team had to accommodate for Jody in his confirmation class, and I didn't receive any There was no problem. It was fine. And so at that, and then players kind of treated me differently in a strange sort of way because I was going to church and I was active in my church. Although many of them were too. I saw many of them on Sunday morning at church. So that was really the first piece of it when I realized that for me my faith was really important to me. And it was through university the same kind of thing. And some of the other guys in the Dallas team would kind of kid me about being involved with the church, but. At the end of the day, they'd come up to me and say, well, could you pray for me? Right?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm having a big date tonight.
Yes.
Can you pray for me? I said, I'm not praying for you. I'm praying for your girlfriend.
I love those moments.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting. And then I went into theological school and continued through as an athlete now. So I'm still competitive. I'm a competitive runner now at my ripe old age. And, I run, and I'm on a fairly competitive running team. And so for me, prayer is a big part. For me, running is contemplative prayer. Right. And I'm always I won't say I'm always in prayer, but I'm often in prayer. And my spirituality is animated by the sense of enjoying my body, enjoying the air, like it's a rainy day or a snowy day or a cold day. I'm just out in the elements, and there's a grace and a beauty to it that I find incredibly important. But also prayerful discipline, the discipline that is required to be, I think, a reasonable athlete. If you're going to be, I'm a big fan of people just doing sports for the fun of sports, just for the sheer joy of it. And the teamwork, which again is about the nature of community. And I don't think we can be spiritual without community. We can't be great athletes without community, right? So there's so many lovely parallels between the two. But I was saying, I have a friend of mine who's, very awkward, and he says, I'm afraid of running because people will laugh at me. And I said, a group of people won't laugh at you. Yeah. Runners. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And in fact, they'd be kind of excited about seeing you out run. Like, don't ever worry about that. So there's a communion among runners, even though many of them wouldn't claim any kind of theism. I claim it for them. Of just really cheering for each other. The other thing that's really beautiful about running, and again, going back to winning, if you're in a race, and there are 500 people in the race, and you finish first, second, 12th, 9th, 100th, there's a sense of satisfaction. But if you're in a race with just two people, it's not a whole lot of fun, to be frank, right? It really isn't. So when I make a point of talking to all the athletes, whether you finish 500th or first, in my world, you are, believe it or not, you're absolutely co-equal, whether you finish first or you finish 500th, because that 500th athlete is as critical to the success of that race as the one or two. And good coaching for me is the ability to take that athlete who's going to finish 495th and still keep in them the love of sport, the love of being out there. This is not a moment of humiliation. This is a moment of success and journey and discovery. And I think the same thing's true for churches too. Yeah. If our clergy, our lay leaders can say, this is about journey. Like people say, well, the demise of the church. I go, well, no, we're on a journey. We don't know what the outcome's going to be yet. We got to trust in this thing. I don't know what the athletic journey or the sports journey of the church is going to be. We've been hit pretty hard. So what do? Get back up again? And I've learned that from sports too. How many times have you been knocked down? How many times have I finished last in a race, just feeling humiliated? The only person that's got the sense of humiliation is me. And then going to practice the next day. Yeah,
and going up and doing it again. I like to use the terms with athletes. It's like, who doesn't want to be on mission? Yeah. Right. So you're on this mission to, and if you have the idea in your mind that you're in this thing for the greater good. So if you want to look at it in a sporting perspective, wrestling being an individual sport, you're trying to train these young people. Whoever to set individual goals, but it takes a team of people that you need to suffer around authentically in order to get to your individual goals, so that ultimately the team can. This is a mission, right? So Jesus gave us a mission, gave us one job, right? I joke around at youth night, like he gave us one job, go out, go out and make disciples of all nations, right? And love and share my word and tell people who I am, and go out and make disciples, and so. Let's get on this mission together, and inviting them in on this mission, even in the suffering, even in the fail, right? So if you're falling down, get back up, right? You fall down 6 times, get up 7. That was that one quote I read one time. But it's interesting too when you have your friends who see in you, go pray for me, right? So it's this weird thing. I came in late in the game, right? So faith meant nothing, and then all of a sudden Corey's going to church. What is that? So all my colleagues, my athletes, they see this difference in you, and then they don't know how to take it at first. But all they can really say is if they respect you as a person, then they're going to kind of take a peek around and wonder why and ask those questions. Well, why are you going to church now? Then I'm able to ask them and tell them about who Jesus is. And then I love that when they would come to me and say, can you pray for me?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
They have no idea what they're asking, right? But they just want to somewhat support or whatever it is. And you go and pray for them. And then you can have such beautiful conversations out of that. One, will you pray for me? Because my next one would be, well, what would you like me to pray for specifically? And normally it's met with, well, I don't know. I just said the word, right? Well, no, seriously. Like, what would you like me to pray for you? You know? Well, I don't know. You know, I'd like to be a better person. I guess. You know, and it's like, okay, well, let's mind that a little bit more. Why would you want to be a better person? You know, and then you start going there, and I go, that's where faith lies. You know, at the deep part of it is we seek. And we're searching, and you ask me to do something for you. Let's get in this together. Let's pray together. So just those little things like that I love those moments.
And you're bearing witness too, right?
Yeah.
So when I coached high school football for 10 years at Dartmouth High School, I was defensive coordinator, and the great Doug Quackenbush, late Doug Quackenbush, a lovely man, a mentor of mine, was the head coach. And one day before a game, Doug said, we were on the bus getting ready to go out in the field, and he said, Jody, why don't you lead us in prayer, right? So I said a prayer, and it was a non-theistic prayer, and it was about both teams doing the very best they can, and that we have a great experience, and that everyone stay healthy tonight, and that we just enjoy the sheer joy. Basically, that's the prayer. Just enjoy the joy of being athletes together, right? And Doug would say of that moment that's when we became a team.
Wow.
And the other really fascinating thing about high school football, Doug was the head coach, I was the defensive coach. Another, Eric Thompson, who's a lawyer in the city, was the line coach. We had a couple other excellent coaches on the team, and one of the really interesting things about this is high school football, and our athletes didn't swear. It wasn't because we said you don't swear. Doug didn't swear, Eric didn't swear, I didn't swear. Generally, we don't swear. We just didn't. It's not a part of how we normally communicate with each other. They're both lawyers, and I'm a priest. We don't swear a boatload, right? But our kids, the athletes, decided that we're not going to swear either. And so if a kid said drop the F-bomb or drop the S-bomb or whatever word they used that they felt was inappropriate, they did 25 push-ups.
Wow.
Yeah, it was self-imposed. We did not ask for it. And I thought that was really interesting. So it has to do with character, and you begin to model character. And I think my athletes, and I'm very possessive about them. I still see them today. You know, this is years ago. They still go, "Hey, coach."
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. I love it.
Do you love that term, right?
Yeah.
And
you're coach for life.
You're coach for life.
Yeah.
And that's above. I could tell you some of them are. They're business people and wonderful leaders in our community. And they say, "Hey, coach, how are you today?" Yeah. But it's that kind of affection that's born, I think, of genuine love for those athletes. So my athletes were people I cared deeply about.
Sure.
And Doug was really going back to church. I talk about how we do this as church, that we're on the same team, and we have to instead of having these little pockets inside a parish. Good leadership says, wait a second, we're on the same team, and not in a rah-rah sort of way, but recognizing we wear the same uniforms. We're out there on the same team, so no need to pick on each other. Let's work on how can we make each other the best. Well,
we try to complement each other's roles, right? Like you're on the same team, you may have the same mission, and you have different roles. So I respect your role as you respect mine, because we care more about the mission itself, the end result of what we're going after. I respect yours, you respect mine. We help each other. So my role would be to help complement your role, right? So we can go out together and fall in love with something. Like somebody asked me one time, what constitutes, like how do you keep because it's about sustainability. How do you keep, if you get a young person starting in running, how do you get them to be active for life? So they're 45 years old and still running, maybe even competing. Right? They may drop off because they lose interest at a certain time. To me, it's like if you can, as a coach, if you can find a pathway for a person to fall in love with it, then the odds of them wanting to stay in it longer, the better, right? So you get rid of all that. Well, if you run, you're going to win these things. You're going to create these times. You're going to have that solidified for you, a record, a medal, or whatever. Or if you run this long, you are going to be in this loving process, falling in love with something. It's like creating a relationship with it. I had to create a relationship with wrestling. It's a hard thing to do. Running long distance is hard. right? But you have to create a relationship with it. And what comes with relationship? Pain, suffering, just ask a married guy. Right? It's hard, but you do it anyway, right? You fall in, you lean into to falling in love with it and accept the pain and suffering that comes with it.
Exactly. So flip it on the other side. As a priest, as an Anglican priest, I'm expected to maintain my offices with prayer in the morning and in the evening. And I do that. I have throughout my ministry. I've been a priest for almost 40 years. And the evening one, morning was actually pretty good. I often use worship here at AST as my morning office. I might do prayers a little earlier than that. The evening one, I always did it. But I tell my bishop, I went 7 years, a 7-year stretch where it was dry, lifeless. I absolutely hated it. I didn't look forward to my evening prayers. I did it. I hated it. It was grim. And after 7 years, evening prayer, I hated it. I despised it, but I stuck with it. And at year 7, I made a couple of adjustments. Took off. And now I can't wait to do my evening prayer, right? I can't wait to do it. But the reason for that, I go back to my running. I'm coming back from an injury, and it's really tough. I'm not where I was exactly a year ago. I'm having to climb that mountain again. But what's holding for me, what's sustaining for me, is remembering that prayer experience about just praying. I had to do it. I don't think that moment of just euphoria going. Where it just took off, wouldn't have happened had I not enjoyed the 7 years of dry, lifeless evening prayer. Right?
Wow,
And then there was a shift, and everything altered. Right? So, but that's what it's like. You got it's practice.
You stay in it.
You got to do it, and so my prayer life has informed my athletics, I suppose. Right?
Jody was saying there that the kids, it was out of respect to the coaches that were shaping their behaviour. It wasn't something the coaches said. When you've been working with young offenders in the past, but even in the present, is that the primary way of shaping them, just with example, or what are the things?
Oh, I think you always try to be the best example you can possibly be, and then whatever words you're gonna say, you're gonna make sure that that's followed up with the action of those words, and then just to be, creating a relation. Like when I worked with young offenders, it was half the battle was finding trust, right? So how do you build trust? You build authentic relationship. You can stay in the lane of continuing to gather trust, so a person can share a bit of their lives with you, so they trust you. They know that what you say, you're going to follow through on regardless, and then they hopefully build up their own virtue of just learn. It's a skill to learn how to trust. It's a skill, and it's an act of choice, an act of the will sometimes too, where you, like, how do I trust in God? It's an act of the will. It's a choice, right? So to try to get these young people to, I'm not trying to get them to do anything, but I'm trying to model ways that you can trust and trust willingly, even though you're surrendering the outcome of what you're trusting, right? You surrender in the outcome of what may happen.
And so was that a purely secular place that you were working with when you were working with young offenders? And whereas today you work with a lot of kids, like, but obviously there's a faith component. Sure. Yeah, and what difference does a faith component make? So if you're working with a guy now who's been in prison and you're working with him in the gym, and now there's a faith component, how does that change the look from when you were working in a secular context with young offenders?
Yeah, interesting. In reflection, you go back and you think, okay, 1 second here, just put the sorry about that.
No worries.
When I would work at Alberta Bosco Homes back in the day, and I found in reflection that over those years that I was kind of trying to live a life of virtue, right? So you look at the virtues now as a Christian, you try to live by those, right? But I was doing it kind of naturally, without God at the center, right? And then you come to figure out that, okay, now here I am, for whatever strange reason, God has moved me to this. I'm the director of youth ministry at Saint Benedict Parish. Did not see that coming. At 48 years old, I'm a youth minister now. Right? It's a strange place to be. God love, thank God for throwing me these crazy things. And if he asked me to unplug toilets, I'd do it. And so he's allowing me to use my gifts in this area. So with God in the center of this now, of the virtue that you're trying to I'm trying to lead young people into knowing that they have dignity, that they have inherent gifts that are unique to them. And I did that in to the best of my ability when I worked in youth treatment centers, where I knew right away that they have an inherent dignity, that they were uniquely valued. I didn't know that there was a loving father valuing them. I knew that I did. Right? And I knew that there's other people in the world that if they put themselves around those people, that they genuinely cared for the well-being of their lives. Human people. And if they didn't have any family, there was somebody like me around them, or at least put yourself in front of those people that you've now learned how to trust better. Go out and find those people on your own, sort of thing. And we'll be there to help you. But with God now, when I'm at youth ministry, I can offer them the community of our church and all of us on the same mission, and we all love you. But I can also let them know and tell them that there's a loving Father that's also willing to, or there already in their hearts to walk with them in this, to show them their inherent dignity, to lead them into their gifts that are truly given to them uniquely, to fit into the puzzle of the world, you know. That's what I try to do now, you know. At least I do my best. I have a team of people around me to help me. Yeah.
And Jody, it's something that I think you've mentioned in the past, but athlete, coach, Christian priest, there are overlaps between good leadership in a sporting context and good leadership in a parish context.
I'll give you a really quick example. Again, going back to things I learned from Doug as the head coach. So football, again, these are kind of countercultural in the football world, which is very macho. But if my athlete made a mistake, and so David Dean, you made a mistake, and I say, I'd call you to the side. I wouldn't go, David, you blah, 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 blah. I'd say, Dave, come here. Because you already knew you made a mistake. I don't need to tell you made a mistake. You made a mistake. So I say, David, what happened out there? And he said, oh, coach, I just didn't read the right key. My head, I wasn't in it right. I said, and this is what I did. I said, Dave, just sit down for a second, just relax, take a breath, come back when you're ready to go back in, right? Or you might say, coach, I'm not feeling well. I said, okay, we'll put somebody else in, right? But generally, it's I missed something, I made a mistake or whatever. Because the key is never humiliate your athlete. They're your athlete, right? And Doug would say, David Dean's parents, girlfriend, family didn't come to the game to hear him being called names or be humiliated. You never, ever humiliate human beings. That's absolutely wrong. It's antithetical. It's soul destroying. So, I mean, that's, how we treat each other in parishes. Look, I mean, I sometimes think some of the most violent places I've gone have been church meetings, right? Where people love to humiliate each other. We look at Parliament. So it sounds really simple, but how we treat each other, and if somebody makes a mistake, we don't go, oh, that bozo. We talk, we enter into it, and we have a relationship with them. So really simple things I've learned in the football field that I brought to being a priest, being a teacher. Never humiliate an athlete, never humiliate a student in class, right? I'm sure I've done it from time to time, but as a mistake, not as something virtuous. But don't, a student asks a question, or it's obvious they haven't read the article, right? Do we ridicule the student? Or do we say, I noticed you didn't read the article? Is something going on, right? It's like the kid who misses the assignment in a football game, And the other thing that I learned too from coaching, and I guess it's, I work primarily with linebackers. And one year I had two grade 10s to end up being my corner linebackers. They're just little guys, 155 pounds, and they're going to be knocked over by 230-pound guards. Just going to happen. Yeah. They're going to get their butts kicked, right? Physics. Absolutely. And I would say to the kid, even though they're getting beaten every single time, right? I didn't start yelling at them. We don't yell at them. I go, you're doing a good job. Yeah. You're going to get smacked around out there. That kid is big. He's in grade 12. You're in grade 10. He's going to drive you in your butt every single time they pull that guard out there. Your job is to just make one more inch. Just hold them for one fraction of a second longer. And the kid says, I can do that. Yeah. Right?
It's a big,
so you give them achievable outcomes, not, that guy beat you. What's wrong with you? You got to work out harder. Yeah. I'm looking at the same thing the kid's looking at. A big 230, 240-pound guard coming at me. I'm in trouble, right? If you're wrestling with a guy who's 260 pounds, you may be technically better, but he's got all that stuff on you, right?
He might squish you.
He might
squish you.
Exactly.
You know?
So I want my kids to say, look him in the eye and say, you're doing the very best you can. At the end of a game, when a kid's been beaten 10 times, 9 times out of 10, I go up to him and I say, you did a good job today. No, and we're not Pollyannish. We're honest and say, look, you did a good job. This was tough to do.
Apologies, we lost camera there for a second, but we were discussing the lessons that are learned in a sporting context and how they can be applied in the classroom or indeed in parish ministry. And one of the things that you were suggesting, Corey, was that when you're coaching a team, you're coaching a team of persons, and each of those are individual with their own particular stories.
Yeah, and just going off of earlier what you said, Jody, about if you have an individual that may fall short, and never move to humiliation. There's the humiliation of pointing out the flaw or the mistake or whatever the case may be. If you want them to grow and grow as a good and a fine individual who's got the self-esteem to continue on even in the hard, difficult times, is I do my best to try to coach the individual first, which getting to their story, to their own personal story. So if they're coming in with a bad attitude, with mistakes, or if they've made a mistake, it's probably stemming from whatever their individual story is for that day or their life in general. Yeah. So try to get to the individual. Like I was saying, Jesus meets me where I'm at as an individual, and I want to do that as a coach too, as a leader, is meet my young people as individuals first. Yeah. And then go from there.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And the goal is, it's something I sort of constantly remind myself in the classroom, that the goal is not necessarily to get everyone to X level. It's to help each individual become the best theologian they can be, which looks different for each person, and humiliation, denigration, these things just impede that journey and cut it down. Jody, thank you so much. Corey, thank you so much. This has been a really, really, really insightful, educational, and at times inspiring conversation. I can't believe how much we covered. Who would have thought that there was so much overlap between various aspects of sport and culture and ethics, morality and religion. So Professor Jody Clarke, Minister Corey Robinson, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.